So is Noni Madueke destined for a move to Arsenal? That's what we're going to be speaking about in today's show. But also, is this part of a bigger plan by Chelsea that is kind of emerging and is not going away and could actually make Chelsea better next season? That is also, I think, a big question around this transfer, because it doesn't just feel like a transfer in isolation. It feels like one that is part of a domino effect that we see in transfers all the time. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. Now, I do want to get your thoughts in the comments below. Like, my initial reaction to Noni Madueke leaving Chelsea or just being sold by Chelsea this summer, particularly to a direct rival, which I think it was always going to be. It was going to be Arsenal, it was going to be Newcastle, it was maybe going to be Aston Villa if Chelsea were open to selling the player, is the fear of him going there, losing a player who I think by the eye test and just by some of the numbers from last season was our most productive wide player, and the potential of Chelsea losing that, letting that productivity walk out the door, with the potential of him also getting better significantly in his career, and the difference in kind of, a very tight race between like the top 5, 6, 7 in the Premier League. However, thinking about it more, I know many of you have subscribed to my Substack. I'm going to be releasing a piece about this in more depth when we look at some of the numbers. I think there is more justification to sell Noni Madueke. I do think there are some strong counterpoints. I don't think the strong counterpoint is he's rubbish. I think the strong counterpoint is based on what Chelsea already have and what they could still get this summer, with the understanding that this is a risk. I don't think Chelsea selling Noni Madueke to Arsenal comes without any risk. Of course it does, because there are hypotheticals around this situation. And the hypotheticals, positive and negative, you can weigh up in your mind what you think is more logical based on the evidence we have currently. But I think that is part of it as well, with the added bonus or the added reality that Chelsea clearly are not done in terms of attacking signings, but also need to sell players, and that in itself is a challenge. So David Ornstein reported this, that Arsenal have agreed to personal terms with Madueke. He's given the green light for the move, but there have been no club-to-club talks yet. Arsenal apparently have good relations with Chelsea, obviously signing Kepa Arrizabalaga already this summer, the business we've done with them in the past for Kai Havertz. Now, I think there still has to be some trepidation around this, but when just thinking about it more broadly, you look at the players that Chelsea have sold to Arsenal quite recently, because, a lot of the players we've sold to Arsenal in the past have kind of been players, or have gone to Arsenal in the past, have kind of been players that have already passed their best at Chelsea. Kai Havertz was the first one of those, at least in a long period of time, where arguably that's not the case. He's still a very young player. But I have to say, him, Mason Mount going to Manchester United, how many years? 2 years almost away from that signing, probably maybe more at this point, is, you look at both of them, and I don't think any of them have come back to bite Chelsea, or at least look like they are significantly better than when we sold them. I mean, Mason Mount has had serious injury problems. I think Kai Havertz has kind of remained where he was as a player. I think it says a lot that Arsenal, 2 years after signing Kai Havertz, are still looking for a definitive number 9, a player who's going to get them to the next level. I think that the fact that they are looking for attacking signings after signing Kai Havertz, I think tells you all you need to know really about how that deal has worked out. I'm not saying that he's been a complete disaster, but I don't think he's gone up to a level. And also, let's talk about it bluntly, Cole Palmer has been a million times better, has been the player that I think we all thought Kai Havertz was going to be when he signed for Chelsea. So there is that. Like, just because you're selling to a direct rival or a team you should be competing with, Chelsea only finished 5 points below Arsenal in the Premier League table. So give or take, that can change next year. And I think for Noni, I don't really understand it from a player point of view. I have to be blunt about this. Unless he has had it pretty explicitly said to him that you got no future at Chelsea, and even if that's not being briefed, that's why he's made this call. I think in terms of just like logic of first team minutes, definitive first team minutes at Chelsea or at Chelsea or Arsenal in terms of his preferred position, surely remaining at Chelsea is the smarter play. Although you do have a lot of incoming players, new talent coming in who are going to compete for your position, you have shown your ability to get minutes consistently at Chelsea. You have shown an ability to improve at Chelsea, and you've also shown a versatility to play off the left. I mean, maybe that is why Mikel Arteta is looking at him, not just as a potential backup for Bukayo Saka. Bukayo Saka will play the majority of minutes, but Noni does have that ability to move over to the left. And also, we have seen Saka break down. So maybe that is also a part of Madueke's thinking, where I will get opportunities at Arsenal and they aren't, continuing to recruit not only at left wing, but also right wing. You've got Quenda coming to Stamford Bridge next summer as well. So there's that to factor in as well. And maybe just, a change of scenery. Maybe he just feels it's the right time to move on. I mean, that is also a feasible thing. It doesn't have to be that the club have explicitly told him you're going out the door, you're going to be part of the bomb squad or anything like that. But, we have seen Chelsea's recruitment this summer slightly also alter the type of players we're going for. I mean, Joao Pedro is a hint towards that. Jamie Gittins is much more kind of a classic winger, who was, of course, announced yesterday. But as we're about to get to here, I think there is kind of a potential replacement, instant replacement that Chelsea seem to have very keen interest in, or at least there is an expectation from a number of parties that Chelsea are about to move for this player. So, of course, Mohammed Kudus is a name that's been linked to Chelsea pretty consistently. I mean, our interest in this player tracks back even before he joined West Ham, when obviously he was at Ajax. And he could have feasibly been the player that Chelsea signed instead of Cole Palmer in that summer of 2023. There was about 2 other alternatives to Cole Palmer that summer, and that, of course, was Kudus, but also Michael Elise. So a very different world if Chelsea would have signed Mohammed Kudus. But, Mohammed Kudus, I think if you just do a blank comparison on Data MB, FBref or whatever, between Kudus and Madueke does come out better. And you can either take that 2 ways. You can take that with the context of who Mohammed Kudus is playing for, which I think is a very relevant factor. West Ham are not an exciting attacking team. They're not a team that have really, given a platform for, I think, a lot of players to express themselves or kind of develop. They have been a pretty bleak team in the past couple of years. I mean, it all went wrong for David Moyes. At the start of last season, they have Julian Lopetegui. They moved to Graham Potter. Things have not been looking good for West Ham. And there is an expectation from West Ham they're going to lose Mohammed Kudus. So, and, people I respect really do rate Mohammed Kudus. They think this is a very exciting talent, not just as kind of a wide player, but someone who, very impactful, has got a bit of a maverick flair to him as well, which I like, and even in difficult circumstances has shown some real good moments at West Ham, which I think you have to factor in. Madueke has played at a higher level for Chelsea. He's played with players like Cole Palmer. He's played in a team that is challenging and now got Champions League football. I think those are things you have to factor in. Although I am a fan of Noni Madueke, I think he is a very talented footballer. I think he is someone who I could absolutely see going to another level. I think he's been consistently impactful for Chelsea. I also think he's developed his game over the past year to be a little less predictable of I'm going to cut onto my left foot all the time. So that's something as well I factor in why I, just personally rating Noni Madueke, I think maybe losing him could be a loss for Chelsea. But going in for Mohammed Kudus, who, there's already been a 50 million bid rejected, as David Ornstein reported, I think last night. And Jacob Steinberg reported that West Ham expect Chelsea will make a new offer. So apparently Chelsea have already made an offer for Kudus this summer and that's been rejected if Madueke sold. I think that's the big thing there and that's what I would want. And West Ham apparently do not want to sell Kudus to Tottenham but are prepared to deal with Chelsea. I think Steinberg is someone you should be taking serious when he's reporting on West Ham, as are others. I'm not saying you don't take what David Ornstein says seriously. It's just we've heard consistent reporting that not only are Chelsea going to go back in for Mohammed Kudus, but also Kudus himself apparently would favour a move for Chelsea if that situation arises. Because at the moment, we've just had a bid for Kudus from Tottenham. That's not a bidding war between Tottenham and Chelsea, so we don't know that potential hypothetical. If you have those two teams, who is he preferring? And you have conflicting reports. I mean, I've heard more that Kudus is maybe more favouring Chelsea, but until Chelsea seriously go back in for him and try and get a deal done, that is something that, we'll have to see. But I think Kudus would be a player that I'd be quite happy to see join Chelsea. I think he would be an instant player that comes in and elevates what we do. I also just think on Madueke, getting back round to the risk of selling him, it's also on two fronts that Chelsea are probably looking at it and going, we've not only got players for now and for the future, whether you add Quenda into that for next year as well, but also, can we make up for what we're losing from Madueke from like an end product point of view with the players we have, the players we already have? Can Joao Pedro, Jamie Gittins, Esteval Willian, Liam Delap, if you add like an attacking bunch of players, basically, not just natural wide players, they all can elevate Chelsea. They all add more overall. So really, you're not losing much because you're making up for it. Enzo Fernandez continues to contribute goals from midfield. Cole Palmer rediscovers that goal-scoring touch on a more consistent basis. Other players too. And that really makes up for it. So although Noni Madueke could go to Arsenal and impress and score quite a few goals, maybe even match the total he had this season at Chelsea, if everyone else at Chelsea raises the floor basically of our level, you aren't really missing much, are you? And then if you add someone else on top of that, that's a positive as well. So I think that's why there needs to be balance and nuance within it. I think you can simultaneously argue and be concerned of the risk of letting Madueke go at this current point, whilst also, understanding that we do have a bunch of players coming in. Some of those could be better, they could be worse. It's impossible to sit here and tell you that right now based on just a couple of games. In the Club World Cup, we've barely seen Joao Pedro play for Chelsea. Liam Delap has only had a few games. Esteval, we await to see what he does when he adapts to life in English football. Those things could make the sale of Noni Madueke look little bit irrelevant in a quick period of time if Chelsea really do excel. That's a nice hypothetical. There is, of course, a negative hypothetical where things go really wrong. None of the players turn out to be that good. And actually, in a year's time, we're looking back and going, why did we actively weaken our squad by letting Noni go to a direct rival? So it's really whether you're more cynical or more hopeful. I am more hopeful, I have to say. I don't like selling Noni to Arsenal. I don't think it's a great move. I would say I think Chelsea have to put themselves in a position to be well compensated for it. You have to be asking for a fee of close to 60 million. And that's not, I'm not asking, if you're not a fan of Noni Madueke, I'm not asking you to kind of accept it because of football logic. Fees are ridiculous. The logic of that fee is based on what Chelsea are currently paying for wide players and also how other players are being valued by other Premier League clubs. You look across the Premier League right now, Anthony Elanga, Newcastle going upwards of 60 million to try and sign him from Nottingham Forest. Alejandro Garnacho apparently has a 60 million fee on his head from Man United this summer. Mohammed Kudus, what he would be worth if Chelsea were to sign him or if Tottenham were to sign him. There are a number of other players we can talk about. Semenyo, who recently extended his contract with Bournemouth, how much he would have cost in the current market. All of these things need to be factored in, and I think why it's justifiable for Chelsea to turn around to Arsenal, also based on what they paid us for Kai Havertz in 2023. I think it's understandable why Chelsea, in the current market, with what Madueke has done compared to those players and how they're being valued, why you'd be asking for 50 to 60 million. And then it's down to Arsenal, right? They have the personal terms sorted. That doesn't mean you're going to get a cheap fee, as we've seen with arguably with Jamie Gittins, right? Just because you've agreed those terms doesn't mean that the club selling still can't extract a decent fee. And I think that is where Chelsea would be. And Arsenal fans, I know some Arsenal fans will probably turn around, already kind of downbeat on the signing to begin with, will kind of reject that instantly. It's whether the club themselves, Arsenal, will then walk away from that situation. I don't think, just to wrap up here, I don't think if this doesn't materialise and Madueke stays at Chelsea, it's the end of the world. Because some people may see it as a step too far. I think football is fickle, right? If Madueke stays at Chelsea, fights back for his place and starts scoring goals again, I think people will forget it very quickly. But I do think it is, for me, where I sit right here, I can see this still happening. I can see it happening for a variety of reasons, some of which we've gone in on here, some of which other people have gone in on. I just can see it happening. I can see Arsenal seemingly wanting to improve somehow in their wide position. Some of those targets have been similar to Chelsea, and I think once the player has indicated they want to move, I think there is always kind of an inevitability, just like with Jamie Gittins, just like with many others, where the club is kind of not forced, but understands it's in the best interest of all parties to get this deal over the line. Then it's about making sure you're getting a fee that is understandable in that situation, which I think, again, 50 to 60 million, I think in that kind of range, I think is maybe acceptable. If you can get anything over 60, you're laughing. But I think 50 to 60 is, I think, understandable in the current market. So those are my thoughts. I do want to hear your thoughts on Mohammed Kudus. Is this someone that you think would be a real good get for Chelsea? Or are you looking at those numbers and thinking, actually, is it the best deal? Is there other players in the market? Malik Fofana, who we were linked with weeks ago from Lyon and all their financial troubles, still hasn't moved. So he's still potentially out in the market. Of course, he plays, I believe, off the left rather than the right. Should Chelsea be going in there for a striker rather than another kind of inside forward? Is it actually, we should be going for a bigger number 9? I want to hear your thoughts, because there are also other areas of the squad that need looking at, and there are a bunch of players that still need to be sold. And I think also the logic for Madueke is he can go for a big fee. And it's a bit like kind of the classic kind of PSR youth we need to sell these young players because they're easier to sell. And I think out of the current options, Madueke is easier to shift this summer. And clearly the player is open for that move. So those are my thoughts. Please let me know yours in the comments below. Have a great rest of your Sunday. We'll be back again tomorrow to start to look towards the semi-final of the Club World Cup against Fluminense. But for now, subscribe on Substack, subscribe on YouTube, like, comment, interact, all of that good stuff. And I will see you again very, very soon. All the best.